Yep. And here we go.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Primal podcast. This is episode number 7. We're really getting up there. If you missed last week, we did talk about elimination diets. So if you have any interest in learning more about that, check out episode number 6. Now, today we're going to talk
Episode
about...
number 6. It's number 7.
This is number 7. I just said
Yes.
that. Were you listening?
Yes.
Anyways.
It sounded weird.
Well, this week, Patrick's going to talk more about injury and recovery and prevention and all that fun stuff. So let's get started. What do you got to say?
Yeah, so this is actually one of my more favorite topics, especially recently, just because a lot of my personal training has led to and is now currently dealing with a lot of rehabilitation from some of the worst, more severe kind of injuries, whether it be physical injuries or brain injuries type of situation. But this really is one of my... You're tripping me out every time you do that.
Sure.
So this is a podcast, and for those who are watching our video blog, I see you correct your posture every time, and I get self-conscious about my posture. So now I'm gonna sit up nice and tall as well.
It's important.
I agree. I understand, and I agree. But I just see you do that. I look at you.
Shoulders back.
Shoulders back. You're right. Good posture. That is part of injury prevention. So yeah, they're really. It's a great segue. No,
Yay.
Good. What I like to look at as far as injury and injury prevention or recovery from injury, I really like to break things down into the simplest type of movements, simplest type of exercises. So when it comes to I guess starting with prevention and injury prevention, I really like to emphasize the basics. I never like to consider that I've graduated from any sort of movement. You've seen me, at night on the ground doing floor bridges and hip lifts with marches and, quad opposites. So one of my biggest things that I like to tell everybody when preventing injury is you have to make sure you're stable in the basic movements, and those movements you can continue to compound upon those movements.
So even when you master the movement, still practice it.
Yeah, I never really like to consider you mastering a movement. Like I never. A great way.
You're never 100% squatting like perfect.
Yeah, no, you're never graduating from a movement.
Always improve.
Right. So yeah, you can always improve, but you can always challenge yourself into better ranges of motion or stronger ranges of motion, or even stronger during sticking points of a range of motion. So like I was saying, you never really graduate from a movement. For somebody who's like, if we're going through an initial assessment with somebody and it's like, oh yeah, I like to start your warm up with floor bridges, and like, yeah, I didn't really do those. I got past those. I wanted to get to the better stuff. I'm like, that is the good stuff. That is the best stuff to start warming up. You don't graduate from these movements. I still reprogram. I program them into my workouts pretty regularly. So I never like to consider myself like graduating from any of these basic fundamental movements. So I like to emphasize, especially during warm-up, cool down times, emphasizing those basic movements for more of prevention. But another good, especially with prevention, another great way to prevent any sort of injury is to not let your body specialize. And what I mean by that is I really like to emphasize, for me, now there's a lot more, and I can go into the 1,000 other different pillar or off pillars that stem from what I've called my 4 pillars of fitness. I really like to emphasize endurance, strength, flexibility, stability, and those are
So
like,
those are the four.
yeah, those are my real four pillars of exercise, of movement, I should say. And then from there you can stem 100 different ways: muscular endurance, cardiovascular endurance, muscular strength, as far as just more cardiovascular strength. So I mean, there's definitely ways to manipulate and to go deeper into those four pillars, but those are the basic four pillars.
So do you want to kind of explain each pillar? Like, so the first one you said endurance.
Yeah, so that's more of your work capacity, building up your work capacity, whether it be static, more ballistic power, whatever.
So maybe like for example, at first I can only do push-ups on my knees and do three of them, but as I build up my endurance, something like that, would that count? Like I
Yeah,
would build up more. Like so maybe in a month I might get 10 on my knees or two without my knees.
correct. Yeah, absolutely. Or going for long, like if you get onto a cardio machine, or going out for a walk, going for longer walks, building up
Being
endurance,
able to walk faster or run faster.
correct. Longer, yeah, absolutely. And that's another point. One of the things that I always like to emphasize to my clients is I would rather them do the full range of motion. I would rather them to modify a movement to the point where it's almost easy. So going into a push-up. Yeah, you could do a push-up from your knees, but there are some people who, especially that I've worked with, the older population, especially, I have a lady right now who's 82. Um, so we've completely modified how we do a push-up. We do a push-up either from on the wall or on a countertop,
Yeah.
and she's going through the full range of motion of how a push-up should look, engaging the core of how she should be engaging the core, engaging her lats, traps, chest, and
So it's better to have proper form doing it easier than a tech, quote unquote, an easier way than doing it crappy.
like trying to just fire them out. And
Yeah.
and I like to emphasize, don't focus on a rep count, because then you really start to see your form break down at the end, when you're starting to get to like the eighth, the ninth, the 10th rep, and your form breaks down. It's just like, I just want to get this rep count in. Instead, try to focus on more of time under tension. I
Do it to the point where maybe you get tired or your form is diminishing, then stop.
Right, right. Well, and keeping that good form, or not even letting your form diminish, just keeping your form through that whole entire time. Don't worry about a number of reps. You go at a slower, more consistent pace, so your concentric movement is just as takes just as long as your eccentric movement. So there's just ways to manipulate the the time under tension, the muscle, in the way that you need for rehabilitation,
That's
especially.
always my problem because I like to do things really quickly.
Yeah,
So then
a
I
lot of people
can
do.
lack the form.
Right. A lot
And
of people
it's
do.
better to do the correct form slowly. You're probably even engaging the muscles even more
Right.
when you slow it down.
Oh yeah, for sure. And well, you're doing it the right way. Your body is in line. Your muscles are firing the correct way. Your joints are in line. Um, and I do prescribe to the idea of, performing under chaos. So it's not necessarily a terrible thing if your body does get out of line. You still need to be. I mean, that's the world. Our body isn't in perfect alignment every time we go to pick up something, pick up our baby, hold our baby. We're not, bouncing our baby to soothe her in perfect form. So it is important to train your body in that chaotic sort of environment, where you're not in perfect alignment, but you're still structurally strong. Now that's not a beginning point for people. I want that to be understood. That chaotic training is not a beginning point for people, but it is something that I've started to toy with for my own personal training and my own programming. But I hear it. I hear the baby.
For those of you who are just listening, usually we have Arden here with us, but she is sleeping right now in her pack and play in the other room, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. We were trying to keep, or I was trying to keep my voice down at first. Now
Talk
what
it to
it is what it is.
So okay, so endurance is one. What's
Endurance is one.
two? Strength?
Strength. So
So that's
again,
pretty self-explanatory there.
yeah, cardiovascular strength, muscular strength, both are just as important, and that's working different uh, your anaerobic system and your aerobic system and your cardiovascular system. So I mean, that's where you start getting into or metabolic system. That's where you start manipulating those ones in the programming. And trust me, this is not like this is. I understand that with our Alpha Primal community, there's a lot of knowledge that is out there. So if there's stuff that you guys do have questions about, or if there's stuff that you ever want me to clarify in any of these podcasts, let me know. Shoot me a direct message, and especially with some of these, I'm going to be using a little bit more scientific terms just because that's my background. I've anatomy and biology and physiology, like those are my backgrounds. So like I tend to speak in those terms. So if you ever want me to clarify anything, I absolutely will. But during these podcasts, I'm probably going to try to keep, just use the language that I use when I'm in the gym. So you're doing your muscular strength and your cardiovascular strength. Another pillar that I like to do is your flexibility. So that's whether it be your static stretching, your dynamic stretching, yoga, Pilates. Like I like to manipulate and do all those. I like the class setting, but
I think a lot of people as they get older lose flexibility.
that's a big one for sure. I mean, just because we're always in unnatural positions. The chairs are not, our natural resting position. Um, we're not on our feet enough. We're in our cars too much, commuting all the time. So I mean, there's just things that we do just to beat up our body during the day that we need to start realizing and correcting during our workouts. Not necessarily going into the gym with the preset that I'm going to be, bench, squat, deadlift. Those are my 3 days in the gym, and it's where your body needs something different. Your body needs bear crawls and crab walks and sitting in static squats and that kind of stuff for sure. And then the last pillar would be what did we say? Stability. Oh, I love stability. And stability through all the joints. Stability through all the joints. Stability through all ranges of motion through those joints. And so you have shoulders, you have hips and shoulders are really big. Your core stability is a really big one. But yeah, I mean those are my real four pillars. And like I said, I can go further into that with anybody who's more interested in more of a personalized approach to their fitness, because everybody's going to be different. Everybody's going to emphasize one pillar more than the other. So we just want to find an even balance. One of the most interesting things I've ever heard. I've been recently following this guy named Edu Portal, and he's just a phenomenal movement guy, phenomenal philosophy on movement. And one of the things that he was talking about is like his perfect day, his perfect movement day is not when he's like, at his strongest, or not when he's, at his most flexible. It's when he's able to touch every single piece of that at the same time, on the same day at the same time. He's able to be flexible while explosive and controlled and stable, and it's a very interesting approach and a very interesting thought. So my journey has sort of led me to more of that mindset, where it's I want to get to a point where I can be all of those. I can touch every single part. And there have been days where I've felt really, really good, and I've gotten into deeper ranges of motion than I have ever have. And it's just been sort of like opens up your mind to more and different possibilities through those ranges of motion, or through those, like, when I'm doing a longer circuit, all of a sudden you get what's called that runner's high, and you, you just hit another gear. And so we get these glimpses, and we get these touches of into this different realm almost. And it's a very interesting feeling when you get to that point, that I just want, I want it more. I want to see what it's like if I can get all of those into one day, into one movement. And it'd be interesting. So that's where I started going. I got off track there a little bit.
That's okay.
But that's sort of the idea. That's where my movement, and that's why I do value recovery and injury prevention as much as I do, is because
So these four pillars help with preventing injury. Is
more
that what you're saying?
prevention, yeah. But no, I wouldn't say more prevention. I would say everything. It's the pillar for rehabilitation, because during rehab, if you happen to injure yourself and you're going through rehabilitation, you start to take a look at what pillar or what pillars were you emphasizing, where were you deficient in, and where do we need to emphasize. And not to say that we're going to like completely revamp everything that you do, but it's maybe we're going 90% of that strength, or 90% less of what that strength training that you just mainly focused on, and start working on flexibility and more, kinetic movements. And it's just so you can use it for all things. I like to use it for my injury prevention, just because I'm not injured at this point. There are times where I get hurt. There are times where I'll twinge a muscle or something like that, and I'll see where my deficiency was. I'll see where I was going wrong. You know, maybe I was neglecting my cool downs and my stretches at the end, or my animal crawls at the beginning. When you do get that injury, or you do get that twinge in that muscle, I like people to reset their thinking and be like, okay, let's it's not it's not important for me to continue to go on the path that I was going on, because that's leading me to being hurt. Let's figure out a new path. It's let's put a stop in the river here, put a dam in the river here, and reroute the water so it goes somewhere else. Um, and that's really what I like to. It's a journey. It you're not going to be healthy and unhurt 100% of the
No.
time. We're in a movement chaotic place, so you're going to get hurt.
So then, what is your advice for recovery?
Good one. I really
Should we ice it? Meaning
the rest ice compression elevation, old theory. Um, it depends. I have nothing. There's nothing wrong with icing. I mean, especially throughout my college years, I love ice baths. I don't do a lot of them
no,
anymore. I know, I know.
nothing.
Um, hot cold baths. I've seen those. I've seen the cryotherapy. I've only tried the cryotherapy once. Loved it because it was really short, but it's really cold.
I think one of the biggest ones for recovery is definitely going to be time, which people don't want to give.
Yes, for sure, time. But like, time doesn't necessarily mean sit on your couch and do nothing.
Well, that's that's not
Because
what I mean, but yes, that's what some
and
people.
I understand that's not what you meant, because we've had this conversation before. But I do want people out, listening to this, when it's like, oh, take some time off of it, or when a doctor says take some time off of it, really clarify what that means. Because I if a doctor or somebody's prescribing take time off, and what they mean by time off is sitting on the couch, I say fire them. find someone else because that's not the right way to do it. Um, Recovery, though, should be, again, let's look at what happened, what went wrong, and focus on and have a diligent focus on taking care of yourself.
So just the same, like if you were to go to physical therapy from hurting yourself, you're still working those muscles to improve them or to build back the strength. So the
Right.
same thing as if you hurt yourself while working out, you shouldn't just neglect it. You
Right.
should slowly do specific targeted movements to gain back that strength.
Yeah.
And you should probably get advice from a professional, not
Correct.
just,
And that's where that's again. That's why I've always viewed my job as a personal trainer as I don't want people to be with me for forever. I really don't. Like, I mean, I want you to be friends with me forever. Like, that's cool. We'll stay friends and I'll be more than happy to help out. But like, my job is get the advice from me that you need and to be successful for however long that period of time is. Get the advice you need to be successful. So I twinged something in my back. Okay, how did you twinge it? What were you doing? What was the weight that you put in it? Did you feel any pops or pinches or this or that? So like if you can gather up that information and then going to a physical therapist, going to a professional, that really is sometimes, or I should say, going to a physical therapist is the worst case scenario. That's the last thing. That's when the injury has gotten to the point where you need to see a professional, obviously. There have been a lot of warning signs leading up to that point that you neglected or ignored. And when I say the general you, myself is in there. I'm included in that because there have been times where I've neglected stuff or I put something off and it's come up to bite me in the butt, and it's come up to really cause a worse situation than if I would have just taken care of it 6 months ago.
right.
So when it comes to the recovery period, seek out professional help, figure out what you did wrong, and try to see where you can continue to move through the injury. What movements can you do to correct that movement? What movements can you continue to do to stay healthy? It's not sit down and do nothing. after
So even
surgery,
just
after surgery, sure, sit down and do nothing. But
So even just maybe like foam rolling or stretching, things like that are things that maybe you would do to kind of bring the blood flow back to that area and stimulate.
yeah, I'd have to do a lot more research on because I mean, there is research saying that foam rolling does bring blood flow back to the muscle. I like that. I like the foam rolling for more of the compression therapy. Um, so it's a more sadistic type of foam rolling, really finding those spots that really hurt and just grinding those ones out.
That is what you
I do, I know. Yeah, she doesn't like my massages.
like.
I've gotten better.
Yeah. He
Gotten
doesn't
better.
realize that I'm a delicate flower. To massage like you're treating a delicate flower, not yourself.
Yeah, I grind it out. Grind it out. No, but I do really like the foam roller. I like foam rollers, the lacrosse balls. We have oh man, these big weighted bars that we just lay on our hamstrings. It's just compression. I do like the compression stuff. I'd have to do a lot more research. I can't say or give an exact to the whether or not foam rolling brings blood
And that
flow.
means,
I'm interested in any research if anybody has found any,
but the same thing with just asking someone who would be more professional to
yeah,
help you with your injury.
yeah, for sure. And that's really one of the things I've noticed throughout my training and my programming is I've really been able to stay healthy and I've really been able to stay injury free. Knock on wood. I mean, I knock on wood, but um, the reason is I take a very serious approach to injury prevention or injury recovery. So when I feel a twinge during an exercise that I was doing, um, I realized I was doing something wrong. I'll switch up what I was planning to do that day. And I understand that a lot of that has to do with the knowledge that I've acquired and being able to flip the script on a dime like that. But then the next several days, next couple days, I'm really focusing on compressing the area, icing the area, moving through the movements, and really focusing on core control through those movements. And
And rest and recovery.
and rest and recovery for sure from some of the stuff that I was focusing on, whether it be heavier weights or longer runs or something like that. Really, backpedaling with that, not taking that off completely, but backpedaling at that and focusing on one of the other pillars. Um, and it's really allowed me to stay healthy as I've watched people around me break down. So
Another important part is also having proper nutrition
yeah, well, yes.
to help with recovery, to
Um,
reduce inflammation. I mean, you don't want to be recovering with, you know, junk food. You want to be feeding your body nutritious food so it can recover with the right macro and
yeah,
micronutrients.
yeah, no, for sure. That's a big one too. That's one
You don't need a protein shake for recovery.
yeah, no, no. When we yeah. So I do use my nutrition a lot for recovery. A great inflammation, especially when I get any swelling inflammation. Um, I'm not a big proponent of pills, so I'll manipulate my nutrition. And one of the best anti-inflammatories is calorie deprivation. So like intermittent fasting or something like that.
Which
Um,
works for you, but not for everyone.
you're
So
right. I
you can play
agree.
around with it. We're not saying that this is what you should do. This is
This
just
is me.
something that
This
works
is
for
this is
Patrick.
for me. Yeah, this is strictly me. I use intermittent fasting when I get injured or when I have any sort of inflammation, um, and that's inflammation internally or a joint. So if I'm having a bowel situation going on and there's internal inflammation going on, I'll use fasting to really help bring down that inflammation. She's just going crazy back there. She's calling for mom.
Our time is ticking slowly.
Um, so I do like to use my nutrition for my recovery and prevention a lot as well, making sure I'm getting the right macro and micronutrients. And you touched upon protein. That's a big one that a lot of people are misinformed about, I'm going to say. Um,
I think it's better to get your protein from your meals. So making sure you have a complete meal each time you eat. That means having protein, carbs, fats. Um, and then if you need an extra meal, don't have it with a meal replacement shake.
no.
Actually eat a well-rounded meal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I like to get my protein through you're right, through my meals. Um, and just I don't think we need as much protein as we think we do. I hear a lot of times, especially during like an initial consultation with somebody, they're like, oh yeah, I'm getting on an exercise program, and I'm going right after this to the nutrition store to buy a protein shake. Which one would you recommend? And I mean, I read the person, because I truly don't like to recommend any supplements. For me personally, if that's what you want to do, I'm not going to tell you to stop. There are some of my clients that I may tell to stop after I've gotten to know them. I'm not going to tell somebody to stop taking a protein supplement. I'm never going to recommend one. I don't think it's needed. When you're getting a protein in every meal of that you're taking in that day, and then you're taking a protein supplement, you're basically taking that scoop of protein and then dumping it in the toilet. Um, so I just don't think that adding that protein shake is necessary. If it's a meal replacement for somebody who's not getting enough calories, that's something we could talk about, and that's something that I'm fully on board. So I'm not opposed to supplements. Um, especially, there are a couple things that I'm deficient in and that I take that as far I don't promote or recommend just because I don't do enough research on that side of things. So you want information about exercise, I can do you. If you want what I do for nutrition and what my supplements are, I'll be more than happy to have a conversation with somebody about that. But I don't really recommend proteins when somebody asks.
Yeah.
So no, I don't use those to recover.
I think
Basically.
it's just for proper um, recovery. I mean, still making sure that you eat well-rounded meals and nutritious food. I think that's the best advice that we could give.
100%. Yeah, refocus up your diet. It takes some of the take and that's another thing too for people who are having chronic pains, chronic inflammation. It may be a situation where you look at your diet, what we talked about last week with
Elimination
the
diet.
elimination diet. What is causing you to be in this constant inflamed state? So, yeah, that's
I
sort of
think
my
that's
my
a good.
take.
We're hitting the half-hour mark, and Arden's waking up, so we're gonna
Yeah, she's
wrap up
going.
this episode. Next week, we're gonna talk about the 10 Primal Blueprint laws. So we'll kind of go over that from what I learned with the Primal Health Coach Institute. But let us know if you have any questions. You can send us an email or write on any of our podcast forums and let us know. Thanks for
What's it?
listening.
What's the email?
Oh, it's alphaprimal18@gmail.com.
Also, it's my goal this week. So the Alpha Primal community, you can hold me to this. I'm gonna get all the episodes up on YouTube so that you guys can watch it on YouTube too.
There you go. All right.
All
Thank
right,
you.
guys. Bye.